Just another day of class, Dr. Rosen asked his students to read Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad over the weekend. However, most of his students just didn't care. Lily was just like them. Until one day...
These guys. It's so dark in here. Good afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to be discussing Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. And just to refresh everyone's memory, he's out here somewhere, we're going to be looking at it through some of the same negation principles that we've been studying throughout the semester. So I want you to be thinking about how different civilizations come and go and the rationale behind that. And thinking in terms also of the social hierarchy and how it exists in terms of elite status versus what Karl Marx referred to as the proletariat, and we'll take things from there. So, anybody have any first questions before we get started?
We were supposed to read Heart of Darkness over the weekend. Great. This is so boring. I'm just glad I sit in the back of class. Dr. Rosen probably won't even notice if I take a nap.
Lily falls into a deep sleep, only to find her conscience has planned an intervention to deal with her laziness throughout the semester.
Hey, wake up.
What's going on?
You forgot to read the book, didn't you? Would it hurt just to listen to this lecture for an hour?
Yeah, really, you're gonna fail this class.
What's so important about the Heart of Darkness anyway? Can't I just read the Spark Notes and go back to sleep?
Well, actually, Conrad's work contains many sociological concepts that can help you understand what Dr. Rosen's talking about.
I thought this was a dream, but now I see this as a nightmare. Fine, I'll listen to your sociological concepts if you just leave me alone afterwards.
We better start now. This can take a while. I'll just give you a brief summary of what the book was about.
Charles Marlowe was a sailor who captained a steamship up the Congo River with the Belgian trade group, interested in Africa's desired ivory. At the final station, he was to meet a remarkable and powerful agent Kurtz.
While Marlowe was interested in the experience that came with travel, he was harshly introduced to the acts of brutality the company showed toward the natives.
After having problems at the latest steamship, Marlowe was interested in Kurt's crew. Kurtz was rumored to be very sick, and when both the steamship was finally repaired, Marlowe immediately set off with both the agents and African cannibals to meet with Kurtz at the end of station, even though he overheard Kurtz wanted to be left alone.
Marlowe stumbled upon a pile of firewood in a small hut we later find belonged to a Russian trader who advised caution to the company during their journey. Further down the river, the thick fog clears to reveal a group of natives who attacked and killed Marlowe's African helmsman. It took the steamship whistle to scare away the natives and finally meet up with the Russian trader.
The trader claimed that Kurtz had made himself a god to the natives, and that he could not be subjected to their same judgment as any other man. Kurtz then used his power over the tribe to raid the surrounding territories of their ivory. Marlowe then notices the heads of what used to be savages on poles outside his hut.
Once Kurtz was brought upon the steamer, Marlowe learned from the Russian trader that Kurtz had an African mistress who had a great influence over him, despite having a fiancé called the Intendant. He also learned Kurtz ordered the native attack in hopes that the steamer would get sent back. and so he keep going on with his plans.
Despite Kurtz's attempt to escape the steamship, Marlowe led him back on in bad health, both physically and mentally. It was apparent the strange rituals Kurtz held with the natives had driven him insane, and Marlowe's loyalty remained with Kurtz.
On their journey back to the central station, Kurtz became closer with Marlowe and gave him all the works before he died. Kurtz repeatedly screams the horror as his departing words. When Marlowe gets back to the central station, he feels the weight of Kurtz's work and goes back to Europe.
Now he's back in Europe. Marlowe was sought out by various people trying to acquire Kurtz's work on the savage population. Marlowe eventually gives it away, but he removes one page, which was the final one, that exclaims, "Exterminate the brutes." His last mission was to meet the intendant, and when he asked what his last words were, Marlowe explained his last words was his wife's name.
Okay, I'll admit the book doesn't seem so bad after you explain it, but I still don't get how this represents what Dr. Rosen talks about in class.
Well, we'll start by talking about the most widely discussed topic of this book, imperialism.
Imperialism. Noun, definition. Type of government that seeks to increase its size by force and influencing countries to submit to their rule.
Kurtz arrived in Africa not only in search of ivory, but also in order to bring some sort of European influence and culture to the African savages. When Marlowe questions if Kurtz is alive, he thinks of Kurtz's work for the International Society for the Suppression of Savage Customs. He believed Africans were savages who needed European civilization because it was so developed and it was their duty to skirt this good.
What began as the white man's burden transformed into exterminate all the brutes because Kurtz became so tyrannical that he no longer sought to help the natives, but rather extinguished their entire being.
Wow, that sounds awful. What made Europeans think they could take over the African people and change the way they lived?
Well, that was part of the imperialistic age. The countries that had the more power would manifest over the smaller countries in their sphere of influence.
So was this Belgian trade company the only one to try to imperialize Africa?
Far from it. In fact, let's go back to a scene in the book where this becomes evident.
We find ourselves in a doctor's office, where Marlowe is being checked before he departs for Africa. Marlowe notices a picture in the waiting room depicting colonial gains in Africa due to imperialism. He stares at the section taken over by Belgium and how it engulfs the Congo River. When the doctor arrives, he asks Marlowe if insanity runs in his family, as nothing could persuade him to journey down the Congo River in his right mind. He also asks Marlowe if he could measure his head, as many changes occurred to the mind of the men on their journey to Africa. The doctor then warns that he never does see the men return to him. However, Marlowe shakes off his comments and instead becomes annoyed.
Why didn't Marlowe try to stop the brutality he saw towards the natives? He had to have felt bad for them, right?
While he does show some sympathy towards the natives, he mostly sympathizes their primitive nature, rather than the treatment they received. Even if he did feel sorry for them, he wasn't at the top of the social hierarchy, and therefore, he didn't have real power to change anything.
That sounds familiar. Is that the pyramid that Dr. Rosen draws on the board?
Social hierarchy is the idea of class structure, separating those who have power from those who do not.
So at the top of the social pyramid in the heart of darkness is Kurtz, right?
To make it easier, we'll start from the bottom.
Started from the bottom, now we're here.
Besides imperialism, Conrad made many controversial comments regarding the color line in his work. And while some may seem racist to today's standards, they accurately represent the views society had towards people of different color at that time. This is why at the bottom of the social hierarchy were the natives, and at the top was Kurtz. It was simply a matter of black and white. The following is a step-by-step explanation of the social hierarchy from the natives to Kurtz. The natives. The natives were at the base of the social hierarchy due to the idea of race in the form of a color line. Because they are black, Europeans at the time believed they were primitive and almost animalistic savages, rather than functioning human beings. It was this notion that led Europeans to believe that they were meant to imperialize areas of Africa in order to improve them through the integration of European colonization. Women. Women were barely above the natives on the social hierarchy. They were believed to be very naive at the time, and men believed women did not have the ability to handle the truth. They filled very traditional roles and did not venture from them throughout their lifetime. For example, at the end of the novel, Marlowe lies to Kurtz's fiancée and tells her Kurtz uttered her name as his last words, because he did not believe that she could handle the truth of Kurtz's real last words. In another scene, Marlowe goes to see his aunt, who believes the company is going to Africa to help the natives, when in reality they are in search for ivory for profit. Here Marlowe finds folly in his aunt's naivety. The agents. The agents worked under the leadership of the manager and Marlowe. They were what Dr. Rosa would classify as the middle class. While they were not looked down upon like the natives, they still had no real power and followed the instruction of the men above them. Marlowe and the manager. Both men were looked to for directions by the agents who worked for them, and while they did have some power to control classes beneath them on the social hierarchy, they still could not make any radical change. Think of them as the elite class, but remember there is a king that presides over their judgment, and that king is Kurtz. Kurtz was respected and even a godlike figure to some. While Marlowe had only heard rumors of Kurtz, he was still amazed by him. Kurtz had ultimate power, and if those around him did not recognize his presence, he would kill them, shown by the heads of rebels on posts outside of his hut. He had the greatest ability to demand change, but why would he want it? He had the greatest power in his position, and it was perhaps this power that drove him insane. Joseph Conrad brought light to the fact that even though Kurtz was at the top of the social hierarchy and he came to Africa to rake the profits of ivory, when Marlowe finally reached Kurtz, he realized the strife of imperialism and greed had corrupted him, and later led to his ultimate death. After almost an hour since Lily fell asleep, the end of class was quickly approaching.
So that's a really good point. But that does bring us to the end of the lecture. So what I'd like to do now is just sort of test your mettle on this. So if you'll get out a piece of paper and a pen, I'm going to take a little quiz thing right now. Cool.
We're having a quiz.
What? Oh wait, no, I got this one.